So last week I completed one of the biggest goals that I had as a photographer in 2024, which was to simplify my workflow, create a camera and lens lineup that made sense for me, that wasn't bloated, wasn't overly complicated, and had all the fat cut out of it. And I'm proud to say that with the addition of this lens, I now have a 3-lens lineup and 1 camera body lineup that makes sense with a few other little extras sprinkled in here. So in this video, we're gonna go over this lineup. I'm gonna explain my logic in this lineup, and maybe it will help some of you out there who are trying to simplify your setup as well. And big thank you to Squarespace for sponsoring today's video. We'll talk about them a little bit later on. Now, the catalyst for this change came at the beginning of this year when I made a video going over my everyday carry for photo and video. That video was way too complicated. There was a camera for this, a camera for this, a camera for this, a lens for this, a lens for this. It was just bloated, confusing, and it didn't work. I didn't feel good publishing that video. There were a lot of comments saying this was too complicated, and I felt that way after making it. I was like, you've got to chill out. You've got to figure out some solution to this problem. And that is when I started beginning the process of switching over to Nikon. I had used Nikon in the past, but I wasn't sold on the Z lineup until I used the Z8 and just absolutely fell in love with it. It's an amazing camera. It does everything I needed to do for both photo as well as video, which is where a lot of the complication in my workflow comes into play. I do art photography, like my daily photo project on Instagram is the artistic side of me, but I also do commercial work for clients. I do the whole social media side of thing. I do YouTube as well. So I needed a camera that did a little bit of everything, and I needed my lens lineup to reflect that as well. So getting into the lens lineup, let's start with the newest acquisition to this lineup, which is my telephoto option. I went with the 135 1.8 Plena lens. Now, a lot of people, if they're going to use a telephoto, might go with a 70 to 200 because it fits in your needs. For me, I'm not someone who uses telephoto ever for any of my art photography. Something you'd see on my Instagram or Evan Ram photo is never going to be made at 200 millimeters. It's just something I know about myself. I've had those lenses in the past and I never used them. So I wanted to go with a telephoto option that made sense for the types of things that I create. So I focused primarily on more of the client side of things as well as the video side of things. What was a lens that would give me a unique look? And that was this 135 1.8. Now, I read all the reviews of this lens. I was very skeptical of how good it was actually going to be, but once I began trying it out, I'm blown away. I've done some test portraits of myself. The clarity is insane. The images are sharp. The bokeh is beautiful. And when you're using it for video, you get a really unique look. That depth of field is not something you see a lot of times, especially on social media, which is where a lot of my business is coming from, creating photo and video for social media. So I wanted to get a lens that allowed me to utilize that shallow depth of field as a creative element, something that I could work into my photos to make them stand out in today's social media, internet, e-com world, which I primarily work in, against all the people who are using iPhones or using ultra-wide lenses. I thought this would be a really cool creative option, and even though I've only used it a little bit, I'm very excited to test this out a little bit more. Now, next in the lineup is the tried and true 24-70. I don't have to go over this very much because we all know the benefit of a 24-70. It's the reason why it's probably the most popular lens in any photographer's bag. The versatility here is unmatched, both for photo and video. Now, I personally don't love using 24-70 for more creative photography. Like I said, something you'd see on Evan Ram photo. I prefer to use something a little bit smaller, something more compact. But when it comes to working with clients, going out somewhere and trying to create a large batch of images and wanting some variety in those images, the 24-70 is unbeatable. And because this maxes out at 72.8, I felt like having this 135 1.8 was a really nice complement to this lens. If I wanted that really bold telephoto image with a blurry background, I could get that with the 135, but if I was looking for just something more basic, a nice punched in shot, I can do that at 72.8 and I don't have to switch my lens. So these two lenses complement each other nicely for what it is that I need personally. Now, the third lens in this lineup is the Nikon 14-24 2.8. This is a lens that I have a completely separate video about on this channel, but it is still one of my favorite Nikon lenses. It used to be my all-time favorite, but now Now with this 135, it's up for debate. The 135 is so insane that it gives this the run for its money, but the reason I love 14mm is just the unique look you get at this focal length. On the creative side of things, for more of my art photography, I've always loved the way 14mm looked. When I took this up to New York with me, when I had a meeting with Logitech, the images that I made up there are so unique and stellar, and they stand out in the portfolio of New York images that I have. I love that set of photos, and I would say that is my best set of images from the year. You can check those out at Evan Ranft Photo if you want to see more of them and you want to see the formulas and how those edits were made. But when you go more to the client side of things, when you're working on photo or video projects for clients, having 14mm for photo and video is just such a unique POV type look that in today's content world, a lot of people are using iPhones and using ultra wide lenses on their phone. Having the ability to capture that ultra wide look and have everything be sharp from corner to corner and also be able to use the lens in low light is unmatched. It's really going to help you stand out, and I found in my own work I've been able to stand out with this lens. When I was in California working with Google, using this lens in this extremely tight garage that we were in allowed me to create a unique set of images that told the story of the event, and a lot of the creators there were struggling with this location, but because I had this lens with me, it was a breeze for me. Now those are the main lenses and camera body that I'm using next year, but there are two wild cards here. We have this lens and we have the Leica QP back in the mix, but before I talk about these, I want to talk about today's sponsor, Squarespace. So one of the reasons why simplifying this setup was so important for me is because a simplified setup allows me to create more photography, and the more photography I create, the more money my business can generate. You see, I make my money through selling presets on my website evanranft.com, which is built on Squarespace, and through selling products like prints when I have a print drop, or through selling my photo book. And this year, the reason I switched over to this simplified setup was so I could capture more images to eventually put into a book in 2025. My goal is to release my next body of work next summer, and it was made possible with this lineup of lenses and this more simple setup. Now, simplicity is the reason I love Squarespace and why I recommend it to all photographers. If you're looking to take your business to the next level, whether that's selling things, whether that's getting more clients, or just showcasing your work, Squarespace makes it easy because they have a number of different beautiful templates that can be designed by anyone. You don't need web design experience to use tools like Fluid Engine, which are drag and drop features on Squarespace sites. You just grab the element you want on your site to move and you move it. You don't need a coder, you don't need to pay someone thousands of dollars to build a site. You can do it yourself. And if you want someone to just spell it out for you, I have a video linked in the description down below under a tab called Website Resources where I show you exactly how I built my website. Squarespace is the ultimate tool for photographers, and they've made it even easier this year with the introduction of Squarespace payments, so you can process all your payments straight through your Squarespace site, and all the amazing email marketing tools that Squarespace has to offer allow you to contact people who are interested in your work outside of social media. So try it out for yourself. Go to the link in the description down below, or go to squarespace.com/EvanRanft to start a free trial and use code EvanRanft to save 10% at checkout. That's squarespace.com/EvanRanft to start a free trial and use code EvanRanft to save 10% at checkout. Big thank you to Squarespace for sponsoring today's video and being a huge part of my photography business. So the last two pieces of equipment in this setup are my tried and true Leica QP, which I have gone back to ever since I sold my Leica Q2. In the initial video I made earlier this year about my everyday carry, I had a Fujifilm, I had a Leica. It was just too much. So I went back to this, and the reason this camera is still in my lineup is just for everyday situations. Moments where I might not want to have such a large camera body, such a large lens with me. I have this as a smaller option. Now, someone did let me borrow a Leica M10, which is a camera that I've enjoyed using in the past. I might switch the QP to that, not 100% sure yet, but I want to keep something in the lineup that is small and something that passes what I call the hoodie test. I always want to have a camera that I can put into a hoodie just because it enhances the creative experience for me. The Leica QP is not something I'm necessarily going to take out and use with clients. It's not something that I'm going to use for more serious situations, but it is something I'm going to use for the artistic side of photography. But I also have this lens right here, which is the Nikon 28 2.8. Now, this lens is stellar for its size. I was blown away with the initial test that I did of this lens, but I haven't used it as much as I expected to, probably because I'm still favoring the Leica QP, but with this 26mm on the Nikon Z8, I do have a system that is much smaller and does remove a lot of that creative resistance, so I'm going to experiment more with using the Z8 and this lens for more creative things. It's just something that I haven't really worked into the workflow enough to be comfortable with it quite yet, and I just keep going back to the QP, which is a camera that I've had since 2018 or 2019, so it's just more familiar when it comes to those creative tasks. But with that said, that is my simplified minimal Nikon setup for 2025. I want to stick with this setup. This year was a complete headache untying this creative knot that I made for myself by having so many different cameras, so many different options. I just want to stick with this and focus on creating things that I enjoy making. Put my energy into the art and not put my energy into learning new camera systems, getting acquainted with new lenses. I want to focus on the new book. I want to focus on some of the more tech related content that I've been working on the channel recently, and this is the lineup I'll be using to do that. So hit the thumbs up button if you enjoyed this video, subscribe if you are not yet, and make sure you check me out on Instagram at Evan Rampt and Evan Rampt Photo for everything photography. I'll catch y'all in the next video.